it was quite obvious when we were thinking about the topics, and because we are doing it for the awareness on the SDGs also, and we came up with something as this. It is because we believe that a startup, when begins its journey, he feels excited about his entire business proposition and the innovation and disruption he is bringing into the society. At the same time, there are potential risks and opportunities as well as risks. And startups in particular, in Precise, have their own share of risks. Disaster may strike you when you least expect, as they say. It's right, very nice. And we have seen since a period of last 1 to 2 years that how things have been astrayed, and the complete economical setup has been disturbed with natural calamities and the disasters. Being a citizen of Odisha like state, where we are here in the coastal region, and we are every year hit by many disasters, particularly cyclones and others, we know how this affects the economy and at the same time the businesses of the startups also. Some of the statistics reveal that more than half of all business startups fail before they hit the 5-year mark also. And small business trends, which are only about 44% of all businesses, can survive for up to 4th year. After the establishment, most startup closures result from unforeseen circumstances. Disaster and climate change preparedness should be part of our startup risk assessment and management strategy. And we see that these small businesses do collapse also because most business owners don't have a natural disaster plan in place. A recent poll conducted by BizBuySell revealed that only 1 in 5 business owners believe that natural disasters like climate change also poses a threat to their companies. Today, in the lecture of this startup knowledge series, where AIC, NITF, and UNDP Odisha brings a subject which is related to the SDGs as well as to the growth arena of the startups. Today, in the lecture, we will discuss what we mean by risk and resilience, how to measure vulnerability, how to plan for an event and assess the impact, and finally, how we recover from the impact. And it's a proud privilege for me to introduce today's speaker, which is none other than Ms. Abha Misra herself. She has over 29 years of experience of project management, advocacy, action-based research, and implementation of national and community-level development projects. She has specialized skills in project management, project designing, evaluation, and monitoring, and technical knowledge in disaster risk reduction, livelihood, housing, women's empowerment, and tribal studies. She has huge experience as she worked with state-level NGOs, international universities, like University of Frankfurt, Germany, University of Edinburgh, Scotland, and University of Greenwich, London. She has been working with UNDP since 2000 to support state governments across India and UNDP Delhi on the issues of disaster management, disaster risk reduction, and within the framework also worked on issues of housing, livelihood, gender, to name some other sectors also. Ms. Abha Misra is currently working as State Head Odisha UNDP, providing support to various projects like rural housing, disaster management, and coastal resilience, along with waste management, skilling and livelihood promotion, and implementing along with State of Odisha. So welcome, ma'am. Welcome to the 3rd edition. You have been there since all the last editions that we did as one of the audience and co-host also. But today you are the speaker, and we know that this horizon is something which is very close to your heart, and we expect a lot of case studies and that sharing of knowledge from you. So without making any further ado and delay, I hand over you to the floor. Please, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Durga. It's a pleasure to be with all of you again, and this time on a topic which I have been working for a long time, and it's also very, very important. Not only when you think about it as a from a business perspective, but it is also very, very important from a personal perspective. The basic reason why I said this was, as a startup, you have a business, and this business is as of now yours. Maybe there are a couple of other people who are working with you as co-founders or something of that sort, but basically it is yours. So if something happens to you, the startup is lost. And I'm sure all of you would not like that. So without ado, we would start a very, very small presentation, and it will be more interactive in terms of we will discuss a couple of things, and I would be giving you examples in between. So the presentation is very, very light because I think we have all gone very, very after 1.5 years of just looking at the computer screens, we are all bored. So I am going to share my screen with you. Okay. I think, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay.
Just if you can put it on.
Yes, yes, I am doing it. So the first thing is why, as Durga has very, very, very beautifully put across, why is it important? He's also given you certain statistics. So we am not going to put in the statistics, neither I am going to do anything. And we will just dive directly into the why we think it is important. There is a book called Natural Hazards and Unnatural Disasters. Some years ago, or maybe a couple of decades ago, when the Indus Valley civilization was there, or that is one time when we used to think the hazards were, how would you say, they were natural, because it was basically the nature which would take a turn and it will create flooding, or it would bring in a cyclonic storm or anything. Yes, it's still there. Nobody is saying that it is not there. Just give me a second, please. Sushmita, tikke tanku kohibo tikke slow hai. Tikke slow. Nahale contact abo. Sorry, because we are in the office and we have an open office, so I'm sure you're going to. So we are going to have a little bit of disturbance on both sides.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Absolutely.
So the earthquakes, droughts, floods, storms are still, there are natural phenomena. They are natural events. But how is it being turned into an unnatural disaster? Is because the amount of death and damages. Now, a lot of us would say, in Orissa, we have reduced a lot of deaths, which is true due to cyclonic storms, which is true. But have you ever looked at the statistics of what is happening due to lightning, or the road accidents, or because of the conflict? These are also all part of our, disasters. What happens is we only sometimes look at natural hazards. We forget about the man-made hazards or person-made hazards or human-induced hazards. The better word is human-induced hazard. Now, those could be anything. So if you ever have a time, you should look into this. It's an old book, but still, it still holds true. So when you look at the profile, natural profile, and we all have, the geographical location is such that we have all hazards, be it a volcanic eruption, be it a fire, be it earthquakes, landslides, cyclonic storms, avalanches, cloudbursts, and I'm sure you are all looking at it and you are all reading it in the newspapers. We also had a tsunami. Can anybody tell me, put it in the chat box and tell me when was the last tsunami which happened in India? Anybody, please. In the chat, please.
Oh. 2004.
Yes, absolutely right. So that was the first time in the living history when anybody even knew, despite, I working in the disaster management since 2001 and undergoing certain trainings or meetings or anything, we never heard about tsunami at all in India. Not only in India, we didn't even talk about it. So that was a new hazard for us. And we started working on it. And we had the cyclonic storm, which was there in Orissa in 1999, had very high tidal waves. It went up till 9 feet, but not tsunami. Tsunami is far, far different. And it is not due to the cyclonic storms. It is due to an earthquake in the ocean. So these were the things. So every day when you hear, you would understand that these are there. Now, how do these vulnerability impact us? Does it at all will help impact us? Is something we all need to understand. So before we go to there, what is a disaster for us? We need to be very, very clear about what it is. An accident which happens on the road is a disastrous event for the household he belongs to, for the community he belongs to, but they can cope up with it. It may be economical loss for the family, but a disaster goes beyond that, and it is basically when the people are there are not able to cope up with it, it is termed as disaster. And in the past 20 years, it is said that about 4.4 billion people, nearly 2/3 of the population, have been caught up in a natural disaster of any time. And it is causing about 2 trillion damages. I'm talking about these are there. But just look at the COVID. COVID has not only impacted social life of the people, but also impacted economic and also impacted for a long term. Some may survive. Everybody is talking about business booming for the IT sector. But maybe for a weaver or a business person who was selling clothes, it is not it is a big disaster. So disaster is basically when it actually impacts the community on a large. So there are two ways. There's a natural event, which may be, let's say, in the Thar Desert of Rajasthan. It's an event. It happened and it went away. Or if there's a cyclonic storm right in the middle of the ocean where nobody is there, it is just an event. And hazard is a word which means that there is some prevailing vulnerability which is there. And disaster, as I mentioned, is the sudden event which is we are not able, none of the community is able to cope up with. And the capacity is how do we respond to it with our resources, with our own learning, and with our own strength. And this is actually, the capacity would actually tell us that if we want that hazard to become a disaster or leave it like an event. Now, if you look at the COVID situation, in the COVID situation, many of these countries have done very well, and many of the countries haven't done well. So the coping capacity of each or the taking care of the event is different for every. Now, why startups? Why are we talking to you? Why do we want to talk to you? Basically, you are the innovators. You have a new business idea. You have ideated it. You have registered it. You have even secured funds. And you are thinking of sales and you are upscaling it. So what are you doing in terms? You have created a new industry for yourself. There's certain, you have generated employment. You are ensuring that there is competition so that the better and more new products are brought in. You even mobilize the local resources. Because of your work, a lot of people have migrated from the rural areas to urban areas because you're providing them certain services. You have increased the income, and you have people who were there in poverty. You give them. Let's take for an example, Ola. When Ola and Uber or any of the agencies came up, earlier the drivers were very, very few. Some people who could buy cars, they used to drive. And some people who worked with the various industries, they could go and work them, get employment there. But the others would remain. Here was an agency which came, who aggregated some. He gave them on rent, and he created an ecosystem where it was good for the consumer and it was good for income generation. So he used technology, he gave skills and came up with a product which was useful for everybody. But the disaster struck. What was the disaster? Pandemic, the COVID-19. Can somebody unmute themselves and tell me how do they feel that the transport sector has been impacted? It could be the crafts, it could be the Ola Ubers, it could be anybody.
It's basically because of the lockdown, the mobility has been confined to the house. Since people won't be traveling from one point to another, so the whole sector itself is getting affected.
Yes, absolutely true. Now tell me, if you think the whole sector, who are there in the sector?
And the automobile sector overnight became one of the most riskiest sector to invest. So their priority was very less. My friends were involved in automobile startups. So they, for the 2 years, they did not get any funding or anything for that. They have to transfer into other activities like skill development and consultancy. So that was a very devastating effect for them. And it happened within 1 month or 2 months of COVID.
Yes. So one of the impacted person was the startup entrepreneur, which is basically startup entrepreneur. The second, which you mentioned, was the investor in the startup entrepreneur. Others, anybody?
Actually, ma'am, investors are not affected because it is an opportunity for them to invest at a lower valuation.
Okay, we will talk about it. Anybody else? Who are the other people who were impacted?
People working in those sectors?
Yes.
Workers?
Yes. Like drivers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Coming back to it. The first, of course, like you mentioned, the startup, which is the entrepreneur, was impacted. The basic reason is he may have been a new investor or a startup in a small township. He may have just started his business. He could not find investors. Of course, when we talk about, somebody mentioned that the investors were not impacted. In a way, yes. In a way, no. Why yes? They are not impacted because they don't lose money, but they don't have to invest in a risky business. But in a way also, the money which they may have kept for investing in this business, they had to find other avenues, and which may not be up to their interest area or maybe of low return. So somewhere they have also been impacted. The major impact has been on all the how would you say, workers. Now they start from drivers to cleaners to mechanics but not only them. What about, nobody talked about the industry who builds these vehicles. And in turn, all the workers who are there in those industries. So you are looking at an ecosystem. Look at it as an ecosystem where this whole are interlinked and working. One small event or a big event changes the whole landscape, and it will take time to recover. I'll give you one example. In 2008, there was the Thailand 16, I think. I'm forgetting the exact date. There was a big, major flood in Thailand. The whole areas were flooded, and it was there for a long time. What was the impact? Because all these small MSMEs and other things of the car parts of Honda was there, located there. They were losing money because they were not able to give, the inventory was not being able to be maintained. They had no spare parts. Their old running cars which were there, they needed repairs, they could not do it. I'll give you one example. Last year during the COVID, Hyderabad town was flooded. My brother-in-law's car was there under his, apartments parking area. I'm forgetting his car. Till date, the spare part of that car for last 1 year has not been found. They are saying they have now sent it to Mumbai to get it, and somebody is saying it's going to be collected from outside the country, from its main plant. Now I don't know. So for 1 whole year, the car is lying. It's not being used. The money invested is lost in a way, because he has to take some other vehicle or he has to invest in getting taxis. So you can see, when you are having a startup, be it an IT-based startup, you won't believe it, many of the IT-based firms who had offices in Thailand and other areas were impacted because the computers were lost due to flooding. The networking problems were there. The cable didn't work. Let's take an example of the Feni, which happened in 2019. 19, no? No, not 9. Yes, 19. Puri was without electricity up for about 1.5 months. Just imagine your startup working without electricity. You are investing. I in my own household invested money for running the generator. So for me, it was a household thing. But if there is a company there is a small, because you have invested small monies. So when we look at it, and climate change is increasing it, because there is an abnormal rainfall, there are extreme weather events. If you see, we haven't had rains yesterday, day before yesterday, there was a article that 23 districts of Orissa has low rainfall this year. And in places you have very, very high temperatures at different times. So the coolers, the ACs and everything, people's own body doesn't work. So that is also there. Now, why are startups vulnerable? The startup is vulnerable because you have less finances and technical resources at the start of it. You've just starting. So your investment is still less, but it is very, very small, but it is very, very important for you. Secondly, when you are talking about the startups, you're just thinking how to ground my work, how to do it. You have created inventories, but is your inventory properly insured? Is your area which you have selected and the house which you are there, is it disaster resilience? Can it withstand the climate change impact? And the product which you are giving, be it like a small cloth, be it a Swiggy like of a thing. Swiggy started because people were not able to, and then some people had money, so they are buying it. But there are a lot of people who would have bought food from a Swiggy, but they don't have the income. So after a certain point, they have tailored it off. They're not buying it. At one point, it was very high. At another point, it went low. So we are vulnerable. Any startup, any company is vulnerable. So the potential impact on a startup could be on a direct impact would be on any of your fixed assets and capital, damage to any raw material. It could also be injuries and death. How it can be? If the building collapses, or if it's flooded and health hazards happen, or anything. So there's always these part of things. Or there's, I mean, if you remember, I think in 2018, there was a big blast in Bhubaneswar. Can anybody remember when? What type of a blast was there? And it shook the governor's house and neighboring areas. I've given you the clue.
It's a petrol pump blast.
Blast in the petrol pump, Hindustan Petroleum.
Yes, absolutely true. So just imagine, there's such a lot of investment done there, life loss. So we don't know what will happen when. So there is always that threat. So we need to be prepared for it. And then there is, of course, the indirect impact. Because if you, like I mentioned, if we are selling fruits, or we are into an agri product business, and all of a sudden there is a flooding and you don't get anything, you don't have backup, any other mechanism to source those fruits, then for till the next season you are left blank. You don't know what to do, how to run your business. And if you are even have neighboring places to go and get some fruits, the cost is more. So how do you feel? So basically, the impact on any startups could also be felt in these 6 categories: market, logistics, premises, people, procedures, and finance. So if you are able to keep these 6 categories in mind and plan your business, do a risk analysis, look at everything, how any of these things will be impacted if there is a situation, a disastrous situation. And it's always very, very important that you should look at it from all the viewpoints of natural hazards and potential human-induced hazards. I'm sure the business, the way Afghanistan has flared up, Indian businessmen have actually put in a lot of money there. Indian government has invested money. And when you look at from any of this point of view, you would see that there is some or the potential impact on everything, not only just one, in everything. Indian government had to run specialized planes to bring its people back. And we are not very sure how many of them are workers in those units, because they are going to be the last one to be picked up. But they are there. So it's very, very important. It's even in a pandemic, you just saw the migrant workers. Because of the migrant workers, look at the scenario, what is happened. People have gone back, people are going back. But many a times, many businessmen have had to make an extra effort to bring them back. In some places, because they took good care, I can give you 2 examples from Orissa itself. Migration back to Kerala, despite having high COVID instances even now, is very high. The only reason is in Kerala, people have taken very good care of their own people. But while when you look at Gujarat, Maharashtra, they were not taken care well. So they are still reluctant. But because there is no work which they are skilled for here in Odisha, they are returning back. So there is a difference between that. So you have to think about it when you look at it. So we have capital losses. The capital damages for you could be from land, equipment, or revenue drop. Logistic disruption. If you are into any supplies management activity, then it could reduce your market areas. And for logistics also, you will not get transportation, sewage, water supply, electricity. Many of these things would happen. During Feni, most of the power sector was down. So the businesses like small rice mills in Puri had to be run on generators. And many times they did not run on it because it's going to be costly for them. And no, people are not going to pay you more than what was already agreed upon in a way. Then you have human resource loss also. Now, in like the diamond industry of Surat was because most of their workers are from Orissa, Bengal. They were after the COVID, they were facing a lot of trouble. So they actually made good effort and collective efforts to bring them back. They are giving them incentives. They are also taking care of them, which were not they were not earlier taken care of. So we need to really look at these things. So how do you become resilient? Very simple or very difficult. First is you have to measure your business against the vulnerabilities which we have talked about. It could be due to floods, cyclones, earthquakes, oil spills, anything. Wherever you are, you need to look at that risk map. Once you do a risk mapping for yourself, you will be able to plan for an event. Once you have planned for an event, if the event happens, then you have to do an impact assessment. And impact assessment has to be not only for the damages, but also what is the arising need. You may have built your startup now, but let's say the event happens 5 years now. What is the cost of recouping the damages which you have done it? I'm sure the cost has increased in other things. So that is very, very important. And then once you have done that, you have to plan for the recovery. Now, what can be planned? The plan has to be in such a way that you do not overstretch yourself and also build it back better. I'll give you an example. Rural housing is one of the fundamental needs of all of us. But what the government has been doing, the government has been giving small amounts of money to everyone. But with the amount of money which was there, let's say under the Indira Awas Yojana houses, it was very minimal, and it was not taking care of the flood levels. So what did the government do? The government said, okay, we'll give you 95 more man days to work on your own house so that you can increase the plinth level so the flooding doesn't happen. Along with that, because we were not provided, there was the scheme of toilets, which if you look at it, if you don't have proper sanitation mechanism, then you have problems, specifically in terms of health hygiene issues. So that was another thing which was done. So it's very, very important that we link up, we measure, and also we plan in such a way that we are least impacted and we recover the fastest. So your business continuity planning, in keeping in mind the hazard events which are there or the possible events that could occur there, the potential human-induced hazards which can happen, it's very, very important to measure. It's very important. Unless you do that, we will not be able to achieve the SDGs we are talking about, be it sustainable cities, be it zero poverty, no hunger, or anything. And you all, the startups who are doing, are playing a major role in achieving our SDGs. So with these, I would end here and open to questions, and would really like to help any one of you coming and asking how to build your own business continuity planning. I'm willing to help them pro bono also. There is no charge. I would like each one of you as startups having a risk plan for yourself, which would help you to recover faster and be resilient even in the face of disaster. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I believe it was a great learning of understanding the fundamentals right from its root and core. And it was great to know in that perspective also. Before we have questions from the participants, let me just point out a single thing which was in the mind while you were presenting it. I was thinking that sometimes the risks or these hazards or damages, disasters that we discussed about, sometimes they are predictable and sometimes they are unpredictable. Like COVID was never predicted; it was of a different kind, but it affected of a wide range of services and businesses as such. But when we speak of individual businesses per se, uh, what is the way and what is the perspective you would suggest to analyze from a risk assessment point of view? Like whether we should go for external risks only, or there are chances of, or if you can cite some of the examples of the internal risks also, on a generic basis. Of course, every business has its own perspective of thinking.
Durga, you are absolutely right. There are certain unpredictable risks, but risk from a pandemic, if we have built our business continuity planning properly, then we will be able to take care of certain risks. In certain risks, of course, no airlines could have predicted that my aircraft will not fly for 100 days. That's a very, very, unlikely scenario. It's a one-time event. So we may not be able to, but we could always plan. If we had planned in terms of saying that our crafts will not be able to fly from a zone for 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, and what measures I need to take care, where will I have to do some cost cuttings, and what I will need to do, how would I have to engage my own people to retain them, those type of things we can do it. So for a business, from a business perspective, we will always have to look at it in terms of what am I delivering, who am I interlinked to. Let's say I am a startup which is selling clothes online. I have a platform. Now I know that my platform caters to about 5 locations. Now, out of the 5 locations, maybe I will have 2 locations which is flooded for some time. So my weavers or my suppliers will not be able to give me the same, will not be able. So do I increase my sale or my campaigning for these 5 people more? Correct. Or that's one way of looking at. Or I support the suppliers from the area where the likely flooding is to happen, and ask them to build up their inventory and keep it in such move the inventory to certain other places where they will be able to supply when the demand comes in. So these are discussions which needs to happen within the department, within the industry itself, and also there has to be a linkages within each other. Unless and until we do that, we cannot predict it. Now, what did Honda do when Honda was impacted like this? it started immediately upgrading their own supply systems from other countries where they had smaller groups. So they sent in some more people and invested more there so that more spare parts were able to come from that side. So
Correct.
that is how it has to be done. If you plan it, you will be able to do it. It's like, when an army has to move for a war, it is already has a plan of action. It is a dummy plan, but it is able to deliver. So in the similar way, as a company, we will have to do it. And when we are a startup, we have invested without knowing is it going to be a success or a failure? And if I am a little older startup, I am already success and I'm thinking of scale up. But with the scale up, I need to also remember that are there any risk with the scale up? Because I'm sure everybody does that. As a business person, I'm sure each one of you are doing that. But the only thing what we miss is the external factors, which are the risk factors. And we need to take care of the risk factors. Now, when coming back within inside, if you are, let's say, IT company, an IT startup. So what do the IT startup? Now, of course, you have the cloud and other things where you are keeping it. But are we keeping it in one place, or are we distributing in at least 2 places? So if my computer crashes, I still can pull it down from the cloud. But sometimes at one point of time, we did not have that mechanism of pulling it down. Once it crashed. I had to redo everything again in a way. So these are the things each, like you just mentioned, each company will have its own risk factors which requires. And you were looking at that 6 sectors, 6 categories which I mentioned, we will have to figure out how to do it.
Right. So, ma'am, you have been quite a good observer, and from a very long time you have been working on this particular geography. And in the beginning itself, I said that Odisha has been the place which has been worst hit with cyclones and other natural calamities. So, is there any particular problem or any particular risk you would have found that businesses are quite obvious to suffer? So, even with your experience, that would be a light shown to all these startups that is there any segment where you have found that this is a problem which needs to be addressed, and it's something that has to be worked upon, but have been least paid attention? Is there something within your scope of identification?
If you really ask me, if you look at the slide also, one of the biggest challenge of the startups and startup or MSME or SMEs, forget about the bigger pictures, the smaller ones, very few of them actually go in for risk insurance. If you not even, I mean, if I ask you, I think there are how many? 21 of us left here. Out of the 32, only 21 of us left here. How most of us would be having a life insurance? Let me ask, how many of you have health insurance? I'm sure there are at least a couple of dropouts. 21 may be having life insurance. I'm sure there are about 18 of us, or even less than that, who have health insurance. And how many of us have house insurance?
Correct.
How many of us have asset insurance? How many of us have started our businesses as startups in our own houses, have even thought about it, that if this building falls, if I have a fire, if anything happens in the household, there is a cylinder blast, what will happen?
Absolutely.
So that is one thing, is that, and none of the SHGs, even the government, is only doing health, not health insurance. It was basically doing life insurance, group life insurance. Now with the BSKY and Pradhan Mantri Swasthya Yojana and other things, they are linking them up. But how many of they are actually doing asset insurance? And invariably in all the disasters since 1999, most of the SAG groups, most of the small groups who have been working across Odisha have lost assets and have also. Now, that is one of the reasons why these loan waivers are coming in.
Yes, yes.
Or there is a, there are instances where the MFIs, the microfinancing institutions, are being blamed
Have come
because
up,
they're being blamed because they are putting pressure to return their loans and other things. People are committing suicide because of that also. So in the similar way, all these groups have to do it, because you are creating certain assets. The second, you are creating certain products. You're stocking your products, and you are also doing a chain management. So, and the people who are doing IT things, they may not have to have so much of insurance there, but litigation may be there for something. It's like if an Uber driver misbehaves with somebody, Uber is being sued. If there is a murder or a rape, because by
even dispute resolutions are also part of the risk, because that affects the brand and the entire management policies of that particular startup.
Exactly. So risk management is not disaster management, or the disaster and climate change is the bigger picture, which is an external factor which is there, but you also have internal risks,
internal issues. Yes.
And so that is why I say there are two types of disaster hazards also. There is a natural hazard and there is a human induced hazard, and this comes as a part of it.
Right. So we will take a few questions if they are with the participants who are left out. We are right on time, but still if ma'am, if you permit, we will go
2-3 minutes please. I join.
Yeah, if any of the startups has any questions, please unmute and put up your question. Any particular issue you would like to discuss in relation to what we have been discussing since an hour before? Any particular risk or threat you have been identified in your business processes, and you feel it is worth of sharing also, you can please share. But I believe that what picture we had in our mind of a disaster, basically people connect it to natural disasters, but there could be many such internal and external risks which are no less than a disaster for a business. So that idea has come forth very strongly, and it's of immense help to the startups, I believe. So any startup, anything you would like to share, or any questions you have to put in mind?
I think everybody is tired today.
There's a question in the chat box.
About transportation.
Ma'am, I'm working in mainly a development sector, where we're partly a development consultancy and a market linkage source for the small and medium enterprises. Ma'am, I wanted to ask that during this pandemic, it became very difficult for us to reach the beneficiaries at the ground level. So as, at that point, even when we contacted Odisha OLM, they were not able to connect with any SHGs. So how should we plan? Because they are our main beneficiaries. And it is not that we can reach some areas and we can avoid some other places. So how should we approach these kind of problems?
When you are talking about reaching out to beneficiaries in a pandemic situation where contact is difficult, then it becomes a little difficult to plan for it. Basically, or what the only way of doing it is to plan it in such a way and be ready to, as soon as it is permissible, you go and reach them, irrespective. And there's no other way, because certain events like this pandemic, contact is very less, so you cannot do much about it. But if the other way of doing was it, if you had earlier the numbers of the SHGs or the OLM staff, you could have contacted them through virtual modes. which is another way of working with them. And then they would have been able to send you whatever it was you needed for your activities. Hope that answers.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, ma'am, it was very difficult us to foresee this problem before the pandemic. Because
yes. That is why
now,
I said, because the reason being is why we did not foresee it is because we never have witnessed it. We have never thought about it. You know, when anybody does predictions are done, like you do IMD. IMD has been predicting rains. What does it do? It looks at the 10 years data and looks at the patterns and then start predicting it. Now, we businesses have never had to do much with it. Smaller businesses also, because we have never faced these type of situations. Now we have, so we may have to plan it like that.
Even a small intervention I'll make, ma'am. You see, if there are many hyperlocal delivery apps these days coming up, I seldom believe anybody would be looking into these climate change patterns and everything so that they could manage with extra workforce or design their schedules as such. But very few people look into this aspect.
Yeah, that is one of the reasons why, you know, there was this whole new demand for people have come up, specifically the delivery boys and other things.
Yes,
everybody knew how to work, but if they had the proper connects, it would have been easier for them to deliver and do things. There's a question on worried about transport insurance too. Now, when we do, as our products are breakable, and transport insurance is already existing. The only thing is, because you are worried about it, what you need to do is, Mr. Mishra, is need to sit with a couple of agencies, identify what is the quantum of material which you are going to send, what is the packaging material which would be required to ensure that it is not broken, and if it breaks, what is the quantum of money which you would have to you would like to get back, so that how would you say, your losses are made up. So unless and until when a business has to also take proactive steps, it's like the Kisan insurance scheme had a very few takers a couple of years ago. The basic reason why is even because the Bima Yojana was not going, because people thought, my crops will get lost. I don't know. It happens once in a while. It doesn't. And if it happens only to my plot, then I cannot do it. Which was true. Many of the insurance agencies were not paying if it was just in a 1 or 2 GPs and the government had not declared it. So now the companies so the uptake for that crop insurance was very, very low. So what the companies have started doing is now have also started having area-wise insurance parameters. What is the quantum? How will I do? Because today, if they sell the insurance, they will have the money to pay out. If they do not, if there are no people buying insurance, how will they pay out when there is a major disaster? So they also have to create market for them. So they also keep on changing their products. So for your also, one will have to actually look at what are the products, what is the breakage value, and how it is to be done, how should it be sent. Amazon at one point of used to use a lot of bubble papers. Now, because the government of India has been left and right fining people who are creating more plastic waste, so they have started using hardboard packaging materials. Now, what type of tensile strength, how much, what, I'm sure their engineers or their people who have told them must have done some research. So we will have to do, each one of us will have to do some groundwork for our own companies with the right people.
Correct. Absolutely. So I think that answers a great chunk of questions and a lot of enlightenment on the viewpoint of reducing the disaster risks, as well as building up resilience towards climate change and other variable factors that are impacting uh, the growth of the startup. So eventually what we find is that there should undergo, as ma'am said rightly, that on the ground zero one would find that what sort of assessments and preparedness are required for the streamlining of operations as well as tackling with situations which future may carry. We are just come across or are still dealing with a few of the problems right now, but there could be a lot many ahead. So it's not about getting frightened of them. Eventually,
Yes.
we also get down to bring up new solutions to such kind of problems when every time we meet them. So COVID was one such chance. We are still enjoying today virtual meetings, but I believe when physical domains are opened up, then a lot of this digital infrastructure would again be an asset which would be taking to another kind of assessment. So things do change that way. And with this note, I thank you, Avamam, for this wonderful session, and to all the participants who have joined across. Any last word from you, ma'am, and we would wind it up.
No, thank you so much. And thank you all the participants who have been here till the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoyed
Thank you
the
so
meeting.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you
Durga.
so much. And with this, we are ending the third edition of our Startup Knowledge Series with UNDP Odisha. And on behalf of the entire AIC NITF family, as well as the entire team of UNDP Odisha, we are gearing ahead with lot many interesting sessions, and perhaps we believe that this connection, this awareness about SDGs will bring about a radical change in the entire mechanism and in the entire sustainability part of the startups. So with this note, we thank everyone to have joined this session, and see you all again in another session of this Startup Knowledge Series. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank you
good day.
so much. Have a good evening. Bye.